You're very welcome to a small practice information session, Harnessing Digital and the Legal Sector. I'm joined by John Durkin, Senior Digital Transformation Specialist from Enterprise Ireland. John, you're very welcome.
Thanks very
I'll
much,
let you
Justin.
share your screen. I
Okay.
know you were involved in the recent Digital Ireland framework document that was published. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and how that fits in with regards to business in general, and then how it might apply to the legal sector?
Sure, no problem at all. And can you see my slide deck there now at the
And
moment?
I can see your Zizzy background.
Very good, very good. All right. Well, look at so just a little nice kind of piece of context, I suppose, around it. So what has happened over the last 2 or 3 years was the European Union was looking for every member state to launch a digital strategy. So that was all part of the digital decade for 2020 to 2030. And the European Union have called it you can see on the right hand side there, their digital compass, which looks at 4 key areas. And it was very much important for each member state to do it. So I was working with a lot with others from industry and from other state agencies, along with the government departments, on putting together the Harnessing Digital, the Digital Ireland framework, which was published earlier this year. And very much around with that is focusing on how digital is going to impact industry right across every industry over the next 10 years. And you can also see, which is a good strategy also to look into, is the AI here for good strategy. And this kind of does a deeper dive on where AI will apply for industry as well over the next period of time. And that was published at the end of around November, I think, 2021. So again, good to look over these 2 strategies and seeing what's there. Overall, they're feeding into the global aim of Europe, which is the European Digital Decade. And Ireland wants to meet all of those and exceed them. This was the aim is really that we are now very much a digital country and is driving that adoption and to keep us there at that forefront around digital. And while we know we've all the big tech companies, obviously now is the challenge with the SMEs to raise that up. And that's very much what the whole digital harnessing digital framework was all about. So if we have a look, oops, sorry, I think I clicked the wrong, oops, there we go. And so, okay, so if we go in here and we talk about, I suppose, why digitalization is important for the legal services in particular, you can see that under the National Digital Strategy, there was 5 key points. The first one was about driving a step change in digital transformation for business. And notice how it says in particular with SMEs. So this is really interesting because this is an important part of the policy and the strategy is how do we enable small companies to really do digitalization within their business. You can also see from a government perspective, there's a strong focus on digitalization right across the public service. And this obviously will have an impact for the legal services who supply into the public service. And what we're starting to see across industries, and particularly now from the larger companies down, definitely this is starting in manufacturing, but we are starting to see it move into the services area, is that the larger players have invested in digital and they've now their business now is moving to digital first, and they're expecting all of their suppliers, whoever they deal with, to be able to deal with them in a digital way. And if they're not able to do with them in a digital way, they're starting then to go out and look for other suppliers. So that's something to keep in mind as well at the moment around this, because it's not just talk anymore. This is really starting to happen, and we've had some companies who this has been kind of a shock to them, and so they're rapidly now trying to move on their digitalization journey on that to maintain the customers who they thought they had wrapped up for life. But like you can see how this is changing now rapidly. The other big piece, and this is probably very relevant for particularly this sector, is there's a very much a new focus on the regulatory frameworks. And Ireland wants to lead in this area where possible. Now, not in every element of it, but particularly some niche areas that it feels it can do quite strong in. And obviously, we have the GDPR regulation here. There's a new Artificial Intelligence Act that's coming out from the EU and currently working on that at the moment. So the regulatory piece is going to get very, very strong around digitalization. And we'll touch a little bit more on that further on in the presentation. But fundamentally, there's real big opportunities here. So it's important now, I think, for anybody involved in legal services to really start reading up on these new frameworks that are coming through, familiarize themselves, and understand some of the challenges that digitalization is going to bring, and also some of the opportunities to help companies with that. The last two are then more broader. They're talking about delivering skills, and they're talking about then also cybersecurity. And as you mentioned, Justin, you've already covered off a good bit in cybersecurity, which is great. So the skills is also something now that's really a challenge. And there's a new national AI skills strategy going to be released later, hopefully by the end of Q2. And it's going to focus around the idea of how skills and particularly technology is going to change for industry. So that's something to keep an eye out as well for when that gets published. If you look at that, the EU Digital Decade piece, you're starting to see there that the key public services they want is 100% online. They also want 100% access to e-health records. And this is really interesting. They want 75% of companies, and this is all companies, using cloud AI or big data. Right. So if you look at between the national digital strategy, you're looking at where the EU is going. It's very clear that businesses will become digital first this decade. And as a result of that, now is the time to act. Now is really the time to start looking at how you can do stuff with digitalization for your business, regardless of what sector that you're in. And I think particularly in the legal services, we're seeing a lot of change coming. So this is now probably the optimum time to start doing something. So often then, just one of the questions I get asked quite a lot is digitalization all about AI and advanced tech? And my answer to that is always no. Digitalization is more than tech and AI. And it really comes down to the key questions to ask and where to start. And this is often something that comes up. We've seen a stat that's often bandied around is that 70% of digital transformation projects fail. And they usually fail for one or two reasons. One is that there's no buy-in from the top, from the senior management or the CEO or the leadership. And so then the project, it just becomes like another project. And digital transformation isn't a project, it's a strategic change within your business. So it's very important around that. So if you're looking at that there, that's why we've kind of put together this framework in Enterprise Ireland for working with clients, but there's other frameworks out there. But we look at it at four key pillars. You have to have a purpose, you look at your processes, you look at the people, and finally the technology. So when I talk about purpose, what does that mean? You want to ask yourself the question, what do we want to achieve with our digitalization efforts? And this is really important because when you start out in a project, you want to be clear about what you get out of it. For some, this might be they want to optimize their business. For others, it might be wanting to deliver an enhanced customer service. Or for some, it might be, as mentioned earlier, it's forced on them by some of their customers, and so they have to adapt to survive in business. So it becomes a business critical decision there. And you can see then if that is the case, it's really, really important then that you've got buy-in from the top, because this is going to fundamentally change the way you do business, and it can also create new opportunities as well. The other area then to look at is very important is around processes. So how do you use technology to optimize your processes? So the focus here is for every business, they have their way that they do things. And often it's very manual. There's quite a lot of paper involved. And there's a lot of duplication back and forth. Repetitive tasks in particular are something that comes up. Repetitive manual tasks are something that automation and digital is great at doing. So identifying those early on when you do your mapping out of all your processes can be what we call your early wins, dealing with the low-hanging fruits. And there's lots of technologies now on the marketplace, such as robotic process automation, which basically is automating manual tasks. But it doesn't have to be fancy. It can be something as simple as Excel with a series of rules built around it that just automates things. So again, the level that you need to do is depending where you're starting from, but there's a range there that you can do. But it's important to know the processes and what you want to look at. The big piece is people. So digitalization is going to lead to cultural changes within the business because you're going to do things differently. You're going to interact differently with people. You're going to create new products or services that you didn't have before. So there's a challenge here then to bring people in that you work with on that journey, and also some of your customers. So for example, you might be leading in this space, and then you might want to bring your customers on with you on that journey to show the benefits to them that's there. So it's really important to focus in on that as well. And we always talk about here with the people and the culture, you need to bring some training. You need to do a skills audit, see which staff are comfortable with digital. Is there a digital champion within your area that you could do? Somebody who'd like to take a lead on this. So we find in most businesses, there's at least one person who's quite comfortable with digital. And they're a good person to start with because at least you're not on a losing battle from the start. And then gradually it's about education. It's reassuring people that it's not going to replace jobs. I think, there's a fear out there that when you do this, it's going to lead to massive job losses. In the short to medium term, that doesn't look to be the case. And what we've seen is that there's actually what people are doing is it's removing the mundane, boring tasks that people didn't like doing in their jobs, and it's freeing them up to do more value add services, more complicated work, and more higher value work. So that's something as well when you're positioning this is reassure people and look for the benefits it's going to come to the employees for doing this and how it's also going to help your customers. So that's the key thing when you're talking about people. And then finally, the technology. So once you've figured out your purpose and you're very clear and you've got buy-in, once you've mapped out all your processes and you've looked at options where you can streamline it and remove some of the manual repetitive tasks, and you're looking at the people and the skills and the needs that you need, then you pick the technology. And now you're informed. You're able to pick the right technology to meet your right needs for your business. And also you'll be very clear about what you don't know, and you'll know what type of expertise that you need to get to. And if you follow that model or similar models to that, it will lead to a much more successful digital transformation project. Okay. So that's kind of a
And John,
key overview. Yep.
who's best to lead that in your organization? Is it you? Is it the champion, or is it an external consultant, do you think?
So it very much depends when you're looking on your size. So if you've got somebody inside in the business who is comfortable to lead on that, is familiar with some of the concepts around digital, that can be really good, because the advantage there is that it is somebody who knows the business already. Okay, so that gives you a really added bonus to start off with. The buy-in has to come from the top. This is, I can't emphasize this enough. If there is no buy-in from the top, there's no point starting out in this journey. Just pretend, don't even start it, because it won't work. And then what I would suggest is when you've done a little bit about this, get in some expertise to help you with process mapping. There's a lot of good lean consultants who are out there, for example, and they can help out in the process mapping. And like, it sounds a little bit, oh, but that's not digital. But actually, if you do that and you get somebody in to help you streamline a lot of your processes, you then open up the whole world of digital to you. So I would say it's a mixture. Definitely look at some good lean consultants to help you with do some of the process mapping and things like that. It's an invaluable first step with anything on this journey.
And I think your local enterprise office can help with providing
Exactly.
a list of
Correct.
leads so you can get them online.
Exactly, they do indeed. And also the local enterprise office are planning to launch a new digital voucher shortly as well. So that is something also to keep a lookout for, and that's there. But the Leo, the micro for lean that the Leos offer is a really good program. So definitely worth reaching out there to the local enterprise offices for that. So one of the big pieces then, I suppose, that I get asked often is, okay, well, I've done something and I've mapped it out. So where do I go to next? So what I've tried to do on this slide is put together some of the technologies that are currently there and some of the technologies that are in the future. And it's the near future rather than in the distant future. So the first one, and I think due to COVID, this has rapidly accelerated, the cloud platforms, software as a service. So we start to see this aids remote working and distributed locations. Very important, particularly with new future work and where things are going. It also aids document sharing. So, and it can also enhance your cybersecurity. So one of the things that we often find is that small companies have systems on premise. They haven't been updating them. There's no regular patching. And what often happens there is they can open that up to security risks. If you're using cloud solutions, you're actually leveraging the expertise of a large company who's got the resources behind it that you as a small SME probably don't have. So you're able to get some level of extra protection by moving into the cloud from that. Now, I'm not going to say that this is going to remove all your cyber risks, definitely not. And you still need to have good best practices in there, as I'm sure that your previous talks outlined like that from business. But it's just one idea of how cloud can help in this. And it doesn't have to be difficult. For example, you can look there, there's customer relation management, so CRMs. How do you manage your contacts? Rather than having them multiple spreadsheets or dotted around in your Outlook or contacts, put together a good CRM system that allows you to track your customers, who you're dealing with, and you get insights into that. And over time, you can really build some useful things out of that with AI tools down the road. The other big one is online accounting and invoicing. This really should be done, but very little reason not to. And it just makes things very efficient for your business. Electronic signatures obviously is a key part for anything, in particularly in the legal services. So looking at understanding that as well. And the regulatory frameworks around that too is going to be interesting as this changes over the next few years. And that's going to be a moving piece as well. Digital marketing and also document management, obviously a core thing for yourselves. And we'll touch on that now in the future tech around the document management piece. So then just two kind of technologies that are emerging that's quite relevant for the moment is blockchain, which is kind of went through a big hype a few years ago. It was going to be answer everybody's questions, answer the world's problems. And then, it's kind of settled down now. And very much it's around traceability and transparency is a key part to it. But a very interesting thing, which could be quite relevant for the legal services, is this idea of smart contracts or automation. So it's basically an if then else type of scenario. If this happens, do this. And what you can do is do smart contracts that automates the issuing of something when an action happens. And a simple analogy that's often given is if you were buying travel insurance and your airline was delayed by more than 3 hours, this would automatically trigger a refund to your account because it would pull in the information from the airline and your travel and things like that. And insurance companies could offer that as a service. Okay. And I put a link in there too about blockchain and law and some case studies I came across just to give a flavor of what's possible. The other area then is artificial intelligence, and we've all heard a lot about this, and it's the buzzword that's around there. And you can see there's even a new strategy around that I mentioned beforehand. And very much though, what's relevant for the legal services is the whole idea of natural language processing or NLP. And this allows you to speed up research because they can gather vast amounts of information together quickly. It can do language translations. Some of the products now can do up to 20 language translations for you to help. Again, as a guide, you would obviously it would speed up the process. And then predicting rulings is an interesting one that is starting to emerge, where you can feed in details about the case that you're working on, and it will give a prediction of what the decision might be. And this could help you then defend your case or prosecute and tailor your responses to something like that. It's an emerging field. Now, I will say there's caveats around that, and I'll touch on that on the next slide that's coming up, but it's just there. And there's two really good links in there as well, just to talking about how it can apply to the law sector. And what is interesting, they're non-techie, they're very much related to the business. And again, it's just idea generation at this stage, but definitely something worth looking into on that. So, of course, we talk about technology challenges, and you've covered off the cybersecurity in the past. So the main ones that we're looking at is ransomware, malware, and denial of service or DDoS attacks. And so it's good then to have a cybersecurity consultant that you can liaise with, not on full time, but it can be just drawdown days that you need them for, but get them to review your business. And as you add more digital services, go back and review. That's the constant thing. It should be an iterative cycle. As you add more, review. The other big piece then of artificial intelligence, and this is what I was kind of getting to in the previous point, is bias in the tools. So while you can have, this is something that comes off quite a lot. And there's some cases now coming around where you're starting seeing computer vision. There was a focus that it was predominantly based on white males, that because they were the ones originally who designed a lot of the work in it. And so that has a bias now for pieces that comes out. You're also seeing then around decisions on cases. If the data is wrong in the first place going in, AI doesn't make it better. In actual fact, it further reinforces the bias. So there's often the mistake is people say, well, the computer said, so it must be right. That's a fallacy. And so you should be really clear to why. And this goes back to the frameworks we talked about as well, the regulatory frameworks. There's now a big focus in particular, looking at explainable AI, how this works and what's involved with it. The other big pieces then we're finally seeing is emerging of the frameworks and a right to privacy. Okay. So then just to wrap up, very much that's here, we're starting to see some good useful resources that you can avail of, and they're all free. So, and there's a lot out there, but I just kind of picked these two because I've come across them and they're quite good, particularly for SMEs, small companies. The Technology Ireland, the skills nets right across Ireland have a range of them. I think it's about 70 different skill nets. So there's always ones there. I'm sure there's probably one for the legal services as well. But one to look at too is the ICT one. They're doing very much some good webinars and good resource on digital transformation at the moment. Very much well worth checking out. The other ones then that you're looking at then too is around the idea of digital art, the digital skill set, and they've got this tech learn for SMEs, which again is very nice and is up there and is free. And then two other ones is the Go and Grow Online Ireland, and this is a combination between a few companies that offer in-person consultation to boost digital knowledge, and a lot of free resources. And then finally, from Enterprise Ireland side, we've put together a digital scorecard, a free digital scorecard that just helps you do an assessment of where you are in your digital maturity. It's 10 minutes, self-assessment, and that's it. So there you go. There's a whistle stop tour around digital and some of the things that it might apply for the sector.
Thanks very much, John. That's great. That's a real in-depth analysis, or a brief analysis of what's happening out there. If anyone wants to ask us a question, we'll take it on the chat to John. I suppose my question to you, John, is like, what should you do first stage? And I might be repeating it a little bit, like, but just like, there's a lot of big terms in there, a lot of big scenarios. Is it to go back to your people?
Yeah, back to your purpose, process, and people. I think, like, fundamentally for any companies that are starting at this, it's a question about where you start, because it's so big and it's so broad. And often too, what we find with a lot of the SMEs is they don't have the digital expertise in-house. A lot of them very manual, and there's a challenge with that. So I think it's good to start off with, first of all, going to particularly if you're an SME, going to some of your lean consultants, as I said, get somebody in just to look at your business, map out where you're at, look and see if there's opportunities there. I think that's often just the very first step to take, because until you know what the opportunities are, it's really hard to see where to start. And I think starting with something that's an easy win, something that makes sense to your business, and something that just gets you on that first step, that is the important thing. And what we've seen with companies who have done this is, once you do the first piece and you do it, you move on then to the next and the next, because the savings are very transparent as you move along on the digital transformation journey within a business.
Are there any pitfalls that companies could potentially fall into around, maybe, I don't know, growing too fast or missing some key? Yeah.
So what we've seen is definitely some companies tend to rush into using technologies because they heard, well, Mary down the road, she used in her company, or Tom did this, and so it must equally work for my business. That's something to be very careful about. Is if you're going to invest in a piece of technology, make sure it's right for your business. Don't just buy it because somebody else used it. And be clear about what you're going to get out of it, because without that, it's really, really difficult. And usually it fails, because what happens is it's not the right fit. You've put in a lot of money. The staff get frustrated that it's not working. And all of a sudden you've ended up spending money and made things worse rather than making it better. So I would always say, be very careful about the technology that you're doing. Be clear why you're doing it, and not just because it was a recommendation, but it's the right fit for your particular business at this particular point in time.
Sure. And just coming back to this Digital Ireland, the framework, and the purchasing of digital services by government in general, like, how invested are they in this process? Or can you see big changes potentially happening to the purchase of services and then legal services, obviously? But
yeah, particularly, yes. So there's very much around now moving into this whole idea for procuring digital first. And so I think the HSE hack recently or last year was a real big eye opener to that. You started seeing them now moving and opening up to looking to work with smaller companies in particular, people who've got particular niches, that they're very much on a digital focus. They want to be able now to start adapting and bringing this in. And there's a real commitment to government to adopt now on digital services. And they really want to work with Irish industry in particular, where if they've got the services and for them to be able to pitch in for that. So that trend is starting now. And as part of the framework, you'll see there's a whole section talking about the public sector digitalization and the opportunities that will be there for the SMEs. And I know in Enterprise Ireland, that's something that we're actively working with government around that piece.
If this is not too detailed question, but are you seeing any particular criteria or conditions that a small firm needs to show to be purchased as a digital service?
So I think if you're looking at that, one of the big things, and this comes down from the public sector, but also for a lot of companies, is around regulation now around, say, for example, ISO 27001, data governance, cybersecurity. And it's not that you necessarily have to have all of that certification, but you need to be able to show that your business is able to work in a digital world and be aware of it. So how do you manage your data? How do you, so because you're going to be asked those questions when you tender for this now. So it's very important. I would say, look at the ISO 27001 framework, for example, see there's some of the questions that's in it, and pick out the ones that you could say, okay, I can do some of these, and I can again manage that to answer it. Again, you don't have to have the certification, but the questions will come out to that. Now, if you have it, great, because it ticks you having to do all those, but it is definitely something we're seeing. And while I'd love to believe that it's there for best practice and security, it's really because it reduces their risk. And so what they're looking at as they do new digital services, they want people who are comfortable and can demonstrate that they are secure, they follow best practices, and they're going to protect any information. And I particularly would imagine the legal services, this is going to be really critical. So being able to put together a good, strong framework and demonstrate that you're secure and you're responsible about how you manage data. That is a key thing that's going to be a part of any of the pitches that you're going to be making.
And are you seeing any? Is a lot of this agenda being driven through Europe? Is it, or?
So it's quite interesting. Europe is definitely wanting to move ahead. I think and we saw that with the digital decade, their big objectives, again, 75% of companies using cloud and AI, and that they see that this is the move they need to move into that direction. And they're starting to invest heavily in this now. So there's loads of opportunities, and the regulatory side is really growing as well. But what we've interestingly noticed over the last number of months, talking to quite an array of clients, is that larger companies in particular have started implementing their digital services, and they're well on the way down that route. And when they come to sub-suppliers, they're saying, oh, well, look, can your system interact with us? Do you have electronic signatures? This is what we're doing now. And when companies start saying no to any of those questions, they're finding the door not completely closed off, but they're definitely getting more and more difficult to do that. And from what we can see, that's growing. It started off about a year ago as one or two, but there's been enough of momentum now building up that we're starting to see this as a more regular feedback we're getting from some of the SMEs. So I would say it's definitely starting now to come in that direction.
We're just coming into the last two or 3 minutes. So if anyone wants to ask John a question, from my side, is there any particular sector that's adopting this faster, or is there any professional services for industry that's adopting digitalization faster that you can see?
Yeah, so one of the sectors that actually adapted it really the quickest, and is probably a good model that I think other sectors are going to go to, has been the whole animation and the movies sector like that. And particularly if you think about in Ireland, we've had great successes on small companies, but are really punching above their weight. And they've done that because they've leveraged the latest technologies. They're using the latest in AI. They've automated everything. Everything is in the cloud. Security is a key thing for them. So they, as an industry, pivoted a few years ago. And now they are digital first, secure, driving that change that's in it. And it's not a sector that you might automatically think to that's in that. But I think it's a good model to look at that's saying, okay, that's a sector that fundamentally pivoted, and they've capitalized on it and made it work really well for them. So I think there's lessons there to be looked at, that you take a sector that wasn't tech from the start and really pivoted to being that way to do it. And they are doing advanced AI. They're looking at the latest research in that space. So it is interesting to see. So I would think that's a nice sector to look at and just talk about the journey that they've done and see what they've gone to on that piece. But it's all going to be changing over the next few years. So my advice to people is start looking now, reach out to your local enterprise office, or if you're an Enterprise Ireland client, come talk to us, see about the opportunities that are there, get started, and at least the very start, engage a lean consultant to go in and sit down with you and map out your business, and then see, is there how you can start on the next step for digital.
Listen, John, that's a great summary analysis of what we discussed today. So thank you very much. Next week, we're joined by Darren Gibson, who's going to be talking about new ways of working from Gibson Associates. John, we're going to share the slides on with the recording probably on Friday. Brilliant. And if anyone has any questions, they can send me an email at jpurcell@losci.ie. John, you've been a great sport today. Thanks very much. Any final remarks?
No, none very much. It's a real pleasure. Great to see everybody, and I hope you all get started on your digital journey.
Thanks, John.
Take care. All the best. Bye
Bye.
bye.